What happens when the girl everyone discards becomes the one person they can no longer live without? For Nyra being the pack's, Omega meant surviving on scraps, whispers, and the sharp sting of Alpha Halleck's cold disdain. And at the Great Moon ceremony, she wasn't merely ignored. She was humiliated, rejected publicly, cast aside, and thrown into a raging blizzard. She was nothing. She was no one. She stumbled into a collapsing barn, expecting to die. But when morning came, she wasn't alone. 10 massive wild wolves surrounded her like a living barricade, and they weren't asleep. They were guarding her. The blizzard didn't care about Halleck's perfect ceremony. It clawed at the great hall walls, its roar a brutal mockery of the unity speech the Alpha preached inside. Nyra stood in the shadows as she always did near the kitchen doors, where heat from the ovens never reached, and the scent of roasting venison mixed with the sour smell of soap clinging to her cracked hands. She was an Omega, the lowest rung of the Stone River pack. Her wolf, if she even possessed one, was silent, dormant, useless. Tonight was the unity moon, the night Halleck would choose his mate and solidify his rule. Hope was a foolish, dangerous thing for someone like her. But Nyra's heart still pounded. Not because she believed he'd choose her, that was a child's fantasy, but because she harbored a quiet, hidden admiration for Halleck. He was strong, commanding, impossibly handsome, the kind that made she-wolves like Vexa, the beta's daughter, primp and preen for his attention. Nyra only prayed that once he named his Luna, maybe, just maybe, the casual cruelty aimed at her would fade. Then Halleck's voice boomed across the hall, silencing everything. He stood tall on the raised platform, a dark icon carved from obsidian and arrogance. His eyes swept the crowd. They drifted past eager, hopeful faces. They slid right over Vexa, who was practically vibrating with anticipation, then locked on Nyra. The entire hall froze. Nyra went rigid, dread, sinking icy claws into her spine. He wasn't looking at her with desire. He was looking at her like she was dirt beneath his boot. "We are a pack of strength," Halleck began, his voice low and lethal. "We honor the moon by cutting away the weak, by keeping this pack pure and powerful." He stepped toward her. The crowd split apart like a living tide, leaving Nyra exposed in a suffocating circle. For years he continued stalking closer. "We have carried a burden, a leech, a wolfless drain on our resources." Nyra's blood turned to ice. "Alpha, why? You don't want Omega." His lip curled. "You don't work. You don't serve. You eat our food while offering nothing." "I do my chores," she whispered, tears burning her eyes. "I clean the kitchens, I mend. You are a void." The word struck harder than a physical blow. He was only feet away. "Listen now. Your parents, Derek and Lyra, lowered their heads in shame the day you failed to shift. Your existence is a curse, a weakness I will no longer tolerate." He turned to the pack. "Vexa, daughter of my beta, will stand beside me as my chosen mate." A gasp rippled through the hall. Applause followed like weak thunder. Vexa's face lit with venomous triumph. She shot Nyra a look of pure hatred. "And as my first act with my true mate beside me," Halleck roared, "I cast out this taint. Nyra of no wolf, you are rejected. Not just by me, but by this pack. You are banished. You will leave Stone River territory by moonrise. If you return, you will be hunted as a rogue." He didn't just reject her as a potential mate. She had never been a candidate. He rejected her existence. "Halleck, no. Alpha, please." She collapsed to her knees. "It's a blizzard. I won't survive." "Where will I go? That is not my concern." He turned away. "Guards, take her to the border. Give her nothing." 2 enforcers she'd known her entire life grabbed her arms. No coat, no mercy. They dragged her past her parents, who wouldn't lift their eyes, past Vexa's satisfied smirk. They hauled her through the screaming storm for miles until they reached the icy creek marking the territory's edge. "You heard the alpha," one of them, Brask muttered, refusing to meet her gaze. He'd once shown her small kindnesses. "Go." "Brask, please." Nyra begged, snow seeping into her thin tunic. "My family." "You have no family," the other guard growled the words like they were a verdict. "You're rogue now." He shoved her hard. Nyra stumbled, crashing into the half-frozen creek. The icy water punched the air from her lungs, stealing her breath in one violent instant. By the time she clawed her way up the opposite bank, they were already leaving, back stiff silhouettes swallowed by the storm. She was alone, banished, rejected. Nyra ran. She didn't know where, only away. The wind ripped at her skin, the snow carved into her like knives, and the tears on her cheeks froze before they even fell. Her silent wolf offered nothing. No heat, no strength, no whisper of comfort. She was just a girl in a killing storm, and she was going to die. After an hour or a lifetime, her legs buckled. She collapsed against something solid, warped, wood-flaking paint. She forced her eyes upward through the blur. A barn, old, broken, abandoned, back when humans still farmed this land. But it was shelter, pathetic shelter, but shelter all the same. With the last scraps of strength, Nyra dragged the rotting door open, its hinges screaming like a wounded thing. She staggered inside, the smell of old hay and dry rot filling her lungs. She found a mound of dusty straw in a collapsed stall and curled into it, folding herself small. The cold was too deep now. Her body was slipping away from her. "So this is it," she whispered into the dark. "A barn, a pile of straw, and Omega's death." She shut her eyes. The blizzard's howls and Halleck's ghost voice tangled inside her skull. She didn't expect to ever wake again. Darkness, cold, and then warmth. Nyra drifted in and out of fevered half-dreams. She felt the cold, first a deep, bone-grinding chill carved into her marrow. But at the edges of her fading mind, something new bloomed: warmth. A living heat radiating against her frozen limbs. She dreamt of fur, of slow, powerful breaths, of the scent of pine and wild earth, so strong it smothered the barn's decay. A low rumble vibrated through her dreams, not anger, but a deep, contented growl, like a cat's purr, only massive. Nyra's eyes flew open. She wasn't alone in the hay. Her heart lunged into her throat. She was surrounded, boxed in, embraced. The nest from her nightmare wasn't a metaphor. It was real. Huge furred bodies, pressed against her back, her sides, her legs. She was at the center of a living circle of wolves. She didn't scream. She couldn't. Terror clamped her voice. These weren't Stone River wolves. Stone River wolves were gray and earthy, brown, lean, familiar. These were not. The one cradling her back was midnight black, its coat so thick it shimmered blue in the thin moonlight leaking through the barn boards. Another rested its great head by her feet, silver mottled with storm gray, larger than any wolf she'd ever seen. A third, the color of burned umber, slept with its flank brushing her knee. She counted frantically. 1, 2, 3, 5, 8, 10. 10 enormous wolves. And she was in the center of their pile. Her first thought, she was a captive, a toy, a meal being saved for later. But nothing fit the fear in her mind. Because they weren't holding her down. They were shielding her. The heat pouring from them had kept her alive through the night, kept the cold from finishing its work. The wolf beside her, massive and white as untouched snow, opened its eyes. Not golden, not brown, but a piercing, shockingly human blue. Nyra froze. The white wolf held her gaze calm, unblinking. It didn't lunge. It didn't bare its fangs. Instead, it exhaled a soft breath, a pale plume rising in the cold air, and nudged her shoulder gently. Reassurance. Impossible. Rogues didn't comfort. Rogues were feral, broken. But these wolves weren't acting like rogues. As her fear spiked, the others stirred. One by one, eyes opened golden green, amber blue, 10 pairs locking on her. This wasn't a pack. This was an army. The wolf she hadn't seen, the one pressed against her back, rose. A midnight giant towering over the others. The alpha. He was magnificent scar slashing across one eye, an ancient, terrifying kind of wisdom carved into his form. He stepped across the cluster with a predator's liquid grace and stood before her. Nyra shoved herself into the hay, shaking so violently she couldn't focus. "Please," she whispered. "I have nothing. I'm just an Omega." The black wolf tilted its head, a disturbingly human gesture. It seemed to weigh her words. And then it did the most terrifying thing Nyra had ever witnessed. It changed. Not with the brutal, snap-crackle violence of a pack shift. This was silent, unnatural fluid. Bones didn't break. They reshaped. Fur didn't retract. It dissolved like smoke. Where the enormous wolf had stood moments ago, a man now knelt. He was as imposing in human form as he had been as a beast, tall, broad, a wild mane of dark hair tumbling over a face marked by a single savage scar. Bare-chested, despite the freezing air, his skin carried faint swirling marks, almost like inked sigils, instead of scars. He wore simple leather breeches, nothing like Stone River's structured gear. He lowered himself into the hay, deliberately placing himself beneath her line of sight. "We know who you are, Nyra," he said, his voice a deep rumble, gravel and thunder woven together. It was the same voice she'd heard in her fevered dreams. Nyra stared at him, unable to make sense of any of it. How do you know my name?" "We've been watching you," he replied, eyes never leaving hers. The other 9 wolves stayed in their monstrous forms, a silent council surrounding her, massive, unmoving, terrifying. "Watching me," she choked out. "Why, I'm nothing." The man actually smiled, slow, sad, and edged with danger. "Nothing," he echoed softly and almost amused. He didn't reach for her. Instead, he motioned to the ring of wolves closing her in. "My name is Corvin. This is my guard. We are the Unchained. We crossed half a continent, hunted by alphas, despised by packs who fear an ancient prophecy. And it brought us through the worst blizzard of the century to this dying barn." He let the words settle in the cold air. It didn't lead us to a pack. It didn't lead us to an alpha. His gaze locked onto her, unshakable. It led us to you. Nyra's breath hitched. The wolves, the storm, her rejection, her death sentence. Everything she thought she knew was cracking apart. "I don't understand," she whispered. "I know," Corvin murmured, his voice softening. "But you will." He looked toward the 9 wolves, their eyes burning with reverence that scared her more than the blizzard ever had. Halleck made a mistake. He didn't just banish an Omega. Corvin's voice sharpened. He cast out a queen. The first pale light of dawn slipped through the barn slats, painting the scene in ghostly streaks of silver. Nyra sat frozen hay, pricking her skin, the wolves' warmth unnervingly tender against her back. A queen. The word was so absurd it nearly dragged a laugh out of her throat. But Corvin wasn't joking. He watched her with unwavering certainty. His 9 wolves remained a wall of flesh and fur around her living shields. "You're wrong," Nyra finally said, her voice hoarse. "You're mistaken. My wolf is silent. I'm an Omega, the weakest of all." Corvin shook his head, a dark lock falling over his scarred eye. "You were told you're weak. You were trained to believe it." His tone sharpened. "That is not the same thing." He gestured to the massive white wolf, the one with the piercing blue eyes. "This is Ashore, my second." The white wolf exhaled sharply. And then, just like Corvin shifted in that horrifyingly smooth, unnatural way, a man knelt where the wolf had been, leaner, with pale, flax-colored hair and those same electric blue eyes. "An honor, my lady," Ashore said, voice smooth and formal as he bowed his head. Nyra flinched. Stop calling me that. Corvin lifted a hand, not touching her, but steadying the air itself. Nyra, what did they tell you about your birth? I was born during the red moon. My mother, Lyra, almost died. My father, Derek, said it was a bad omen. That I was born without the gift. Without the gift, Corvin repeated, bitterness coiling through his tone. A lie. Nyra stared. What, you weren't born powerless, Nyra. You were born with all of it. He rose, pacing the small, open circle in the center of the wolf's nest. The prophecy is ancient. When the blood of the Alpha and the soul of the Omega unite in one body, the lunar matriarch will rise, a white wolf healer of the broken binder of the packs, and she will appear in the time of greatest peril, when the blood moon rises to devour the world. Nyra tried to laugh, but the sound broke before it formed. That's a children's story, just a nursery rhyme. It's truth, Corvin said, conviction ringing through every word. Your pack knew. Your parents knew. They saw your power. A true matriarch, an Omega who is also Alpha, can bind wolves to her will. They feared what you could do to them, how easily you could command them, control them. You terrified them, Nyra. You were a threat to their precious Alpha bloodline. Corvin's voice dropped to a razor-quiet whisper. So what did they do? He leaned closer, the air tightening around them. They sought out a hedge witch, a binder, and they silenced you. Nyra's hand flew to her throat. Silenced. They trapped your wolf, Ashur said, fury threading his voice. Locked her in a cage so deep you couldn't feel her. They forced you into the role of an Omega, hoping the world would forget who you were, hoping you'd forget. The truth slammed into her, whispers in the dark, her parents avoiding her gaze, the hollow, this isn't right feeling she'd carried her entire life. It wasn't emptiness. It had been stolen. But why now? Nyra asked, tears welling, not from grief this time, but burning rage. Why come for me now? The binding depended on your pack bond, Corvin said. As long as Stone River claimed you, even as their lowest Omega, the lock held. But last night Halleck didn't just banish you. He knelt in front of her again. In his arrogance, he performed a full public rejection. He severed the last thread holding your cage together. His eyes deepened. When he cast you out, your true scent, what we've been hunting for years, exploded across the entire continent like a flare. Moonlight, silver winter. The matriarch's scent. Corvin nodded toward his wolves. We are the Unchained, he said. Some call us the Shadow Guard. We're not a pack. We're a brotherhood sworn to the matriarch. We have no Alpha. He bowed his head. We serve only you. As if answering a silent command, the other 8 wolves shifted one after another until men stood in a wide circle around her. Vakil, red-haired and sharp like a seasoned tracker. Solak, younger, bright-eyed with pale blonde hair. The twins, Kieran and Rook, dark, identical, dangerous. Dren, massive and quiet. Severin, all gentle eyes and healer's hands. Malric, a scholar with a mind like a blade. And Heron, towering like someone who could wrestle a bear and win. 10 men, 10 of the strongest wolves she had ever seen. And every one of them stared at her, waiting. What? What do you want from me? She whispered. Corvin smiled, truly smiled for the first time. It softened the scar over his eye. We want nothing, he said. We came to give. To protect you, to train you, to help free the wolf your parents tried to bury. His voice lowered, electric with promise. Unlock your wolf, Nyra. It's time you finally met her. He extended his hand, calloused, warm, steady. Nyra stared at that hand, at the 10 devoted faces watching her, at the memories of Halleck's cruel sneer, Vex's triumphant smirk, her parents' shame. Her whole life she'd been small, quiet, weak. Not anymore. She slipped her cold, cracked hand into Corvin's. His fingers closed around hers, and for the first time in her life, she didn't feel cold. A jolt like lightning shot up her arm. Okay. She breathed, trembling but steadier than she'd ever been. Okay. Show me. The days that followed blurred into agony and revelation. The ruined barn turned into their stronghold, the Unchained's watchtower. Vial and Solak hunted daily, dragging in deer and rabbits without hesitation. The others reinforced the barn patching holes, sealing wind cracks, reshaping it into something that could be defended. But Nyra's training remained the priority. The binding is broken, Corvin said on the first morning, but the lock is old and rusted. Your wolf has been trapped for 20 years. She's weak. She's furious. And she's scared. He was right. Nyra's first attempts to summon her wolf were failures. She found nothing but the familiar suffocating void where power should have been. Stop trying to force it, Ashore said, the strategist in him taking over. You're commanding her like an alpha. You're more than that. You're a matriarch. You don't pull her. Severin added gently. You welcome her. This isn't a battle, Nyra. It's a reunion. So she tried. She sat in the hay, the 10 men, forming a circle around her, a new kind of nest. A human one, a protective one. And Nyra let herself breathe. Let the truth sink into her bones. She wasn't broken. She was waking up. Nyra let herself fall back into the memory of her rejection. She forced herself to feel it, every jagged edge of the humiliation, the betrayal, the freezing terror. Then something else emerged. A spark. A tiny, furious ember deep inside her. It was her own anger, but not only hers. It was someone else's. Someone. They heard us, a voice whispered inside her mind, raw and unused. Nyra's eyes flew open with a sharp gasp. The guard stiffened. What is it? Corvin asked, scanning her face. I heard her, Nyra whispered, tears stinging her eyes. She's furious. Good. Corvin growled, a fierce grin splitting across his scarred face. Use it. Welcome it. That anger kept you alive long before we did. Nyra closed her eyes again, reaching for the spark. I'm here, she whispered inwardly. I'm sorry, I didn't know. They lied to us. The spark flared, blooming into heat. Lied. Stole the voice. Snarled. Nyra's own rage rose to meet it, fusing with it. They stole our life, she breathed. Our warmth. They left us to die. Never again. The voice was no longer a whisper. It was a roar. A white-hot pain tore through Nyra's body. Nothing like the blistering agony of the cold. This was creation, expansion, rebirth. Bones felt like they were breaking and reforming all at once. Muscles tore, then reknit stronger. She screamed. Stay with her. Corvin barked. Hold the space. The 10 men closed in, forming a tight circle. Hands gripped her shoulders, her back pouring their energy into her. It wasn't symbolic. She could feel them steadying her, grounding her against the storm inside. Let me out. Yes. Nyra threw her head back as the shift detonated through her. A shockwave of blinding silver energy erupted from her body, blasting the men backward. The ancient barn groaned, dust cascading from the rafters. And where Nyra had been, something entirely new stood. The guard scrambled upright, staring in stunned silence. She was enormous, towering above even Corvin's wolf form. Her fur wasn't winter white like an ordinary ice wolf. It was luminous, pearlescent, glowing with soft moonlight from within. Her eyes were no longer blue or gold. They burned silver deep, brilliant, ancient. She was beautiful. She was terrifying. She was the lunar wolf. We are the wolf. Her wolf breathed in her mind. We are free, Nyra answered. The wolf lifted her head and unleashed a howl. It wasn't the cry of an omega or even an alpha. It was the sound of ancient power, grief, fury, joy, destiny, all braided into one earth-shattering call. It echoed through the frozen valley, a challenge and a promise. Corvin was the first to move. He shifted into his massive black wolf and approached, not with dominance, but with reverence. His head bowed low. He nudged her shoulder, and Nyra's wolf leaned into him with a soft, vibrating rumble. One by one, the others shifted, 10 massive wolves of black, white, gray, and brown encircling their matriarch. They had found her, and she had finally found herself. They spent the entire day running the valley in their wolf forms. It was the first time Nyra had ever run as a wolf, and she was faster than all of them, her paws gliding across the snow, like she was born of the wind itself. She could feel the forest, the cold air, the heartbeat of the land. She wasn't just alive, she was connected. By dusk, they returned to the barn, Nyra still in her wolf form, curled up in the straw. Instinctively, the 10 wolves closed in around her, exactly as they had on the first night. A nest. Her nest. But peace wasn't going to last. 2 miles away at the edge of the woods, a Stone River scout, Torin, lowered his binoculars. Halleck had sent him to find the Omega's frozen body. Instead, he saw an Omega, who wasn't an Omega at all, running with 10 monstrous wolves led by a massive black alpha. And he'd heard a howl so powerful it rattled the ice from the trees. Torin turned and ran, terror pounding through him, harder than the blizzard ever had. He had to warn Alpha Halleck. The reject had returned. And she hadn't come back alone. Stone River was unraveling. In the 3 days since Nyra's banishment, a heavy paw seemed to crush the entire territory. What should have been the triumphant aftermath of the Unity Moon, a new Luna, a renewed pack, had instead brought emptiness. Hunts were failing. Deer that should have filled the forest were nowhere. The blizzard had ended, but a deeper, unnatural cold lingered. Packmates snapped at each other, tempers frayed to pieces. The great hall felt stagnant, its air sour and hostile. Alpha Halleck sat on his carved throne, fighting a gnawing feeling he'd never known before. Regret. He kept seeing her face, Nyra's shock, her disbelief, the way every bit of light drained from her eyes, right before the guards dragged her away. He knew now. He had made a mistake. "You're brooding, my love." Vexa's voice sliced through his thoughts, sickly sweet. She lounged over the arm of his throne nails, digging into his shoulder like claws. "You're the alpha. You did what needed to be done. She was weak. She was a child we were meant to protect," Halleck snapped, jerking away from her touch, startled by the venom in his own voice. Vexa's eyes narrowed. "She was a wolfless leech, and now she's gone. We should be celebrating." Halleck stared at the woman he'd chosen. He thought he'd picked her for strength, pedigree, confidence. But now all he saw was cruelty. He once mistook her sharp edges for power. Now he saw they were simply hunger. He'd traded a quiet, harmless Omega for a vicious, power-hungry Luna, and she grated on him more with every passing hour. She was not a leech. The words came from Brask, one of the guards who had escorted Nyra to the border. His voice was quiet, but carried clearly through the tense hall. Halleck's gaze snapped toward him. "What did you say, Brask?" Brask rose his chair, scraping harshly. His partner ruled, looked frozen with fear, but Brask's face was set with grim conviction. "I said Alpha," he repeated louder. "She wasn't a leech. She fixed my son's boots when he ripped them. She sang to the pups when their mothers were on patrol. She always took the smallest piece of meat. She never hurt anyone." A ripple of agreement moved through the hall. Wolves who had been too afraid to speak now nodded. "She was weak." Vexa screeched, her voice cracking, but the great hall doors exploded open, slamming into the stone walls. Torin the scout stumbled inside, snow coating him head to toe. His face was bloodless with terror. "Alpha," he gasped, collapsing to his knees. "Alpha, I saw." "Speak!" Halleck roared, leaping to his feet. "It's the Omega." Torin panted. "Nyra. She's not dead." A wave of relief slammed into Halleck so hard His knees nearly buckled. He swallowed it down quickly. She's alive where? At the border. No Alpha? Torrin's eyes shone with a feverish terror. The old human barn. In the valley. She's there. Vexa scoffed. Pathetic. Marcus, send the enforcers. Finish this. She's not alone, Torrin shouted, grabbing Halleck's tunic with trembling hands. You don't understand. She's with them. With who? Rogues worse, Torrin choked out. 10 of them. Massive. Bigger than you, Alpha. One is pure black scarred. Another snow white. Halleck went still. The nursery rhymes. The old stories. The prophecy. A white wolf. An Alpha Torrin whispered voice shaking apart. She shifted. Dead silence flooded the hall. I saw her wolf. I've never seen anything like it. He swallowed hard. It was white, like the moon. It glowed. And Alpha, his voice broke. I heard her howl. Didn't sound like a wolf. It sounded like a command. Halleck staggered back as the truth crashed over him. The failed hunts, the restless pack, the gnawing cold. The goddess wasn't punishing them. She was furious. He hadn't just cast out an Omega. He had banished a deity. She's a witch, Vexa shrieked. Her face drained of all color. Terror of a different breed, twisting her features. She's bewitched those rogues. She's a dark creature. She's come to destroy us. You must kill her, Halleck. You must lead your pack. Kill the witch. Her hysterical voice was the only sound in the hall. Halleck looked out over his pack. Confusion clouded their expressions, but beneath it lurked something far more dangerous. Fear. And fear could be shaped into a weapon. He stood at a crossroads. Admit the catastrophic mistake he'd made, fall to his knees, and beg forgiveness from the girl he'd sentenced to freeze to death. Or rewrite the narrative, claim control, reclaim what was his. He was the Alpha. She was his pack, his territory, his bloodline. She hasn't bewitched them, Halleck growled, pride slithering back into his voice, arrogance rebuilding itself in his spine. She's gathered an army of rogues to challenge us, a direct threat. He surged to his feet, Alpha dominance, flooding the room like a crack of lightning. She is a traitor. He snapped toward his soldiers. Torrin, Brask, ruled. Assemble the war pack, 20 of our strongest. We move on the barn now. We will crush this rebellion of hers, and we will drag the Omega back. She will face trial for treason. But Alpha Nyra's wolf Brask began. Is a perversion? Halleck snarled. A trick. Get the warriors. We move in 1 hour. He had made his choice. He would not go down as the Alpha who lost his pack to a trembling Omega. He would be the Alpha who crushed her, whether she was breathing or not. The barn was no longer a sanctuary. It had become a war room. Vale the tracker had returned at a dead sprint, red hair whipping behind him. They're coming. 20 of them. Full war pack. Halleck is leading. Nyra stood in the center of the barn, her new wolf humming beneath her skin, a molten living force pulsing with heat and certainty. She no longer wore the thin tunic from her rejection. Severin had torn apart one of his own cloaks so she could fashion something warmer, more functional. Fear, the lifelong companion that had lived in her bones, tried to claw its way up. But the new fire burning inside her was stronger. Let them come, she said, surprised by the steel in her own voice. Nyra! Corvin stepped to her side, his 10 men already forming a defensive ring around her, silent, lethal, unwavering. This isn't your fight. Not yet. We can get you out. We can vanish before they ever reach us. Nyra looked at him, then at each of the men who had risked everything to find her, who had warmed her freezing body with their own, who had given her back her wolf, her strength, her name. You've been running from me your whole lives, she said, voice steady. Hunted, chased, scorned. Because of me. Because of a prophecy. She stepped forward, her silver eyes sweeping across her guard. The running stops. This valley is my territory, that pack is my past, and this is my mistake to face. It wasn't your mistake, Solak blurted, fierce and young. It was his. He is my mistake to correct, Nyra replied. She walked to the barn doors and shoved them open with strength she'd never possessed before. The snow had ceased. The valley lay silent under the sharp blue glow of dusk. Then they emerged. 22 wolves stepped out of the tree line, all in shifted form, a declaration of war. They spread wide, surrounding the barn in a deadly semicircle. At their front came a massive gray-brown wolf she knew too well, Halleck. He strode forward, paws crushing the snow beneath him, before shifting, standing nude in the cold, not feeling an ounce of it. Rage hardened his face into stone. Omega! He thundered, his voice rolling across the valley like a storm. You are charged with treason. You have consorted with rogues and raised an army against your true alpha. Surrender now, and I may show mercy. From behind him, Vexa, now in human form and wrapped in a thick fur, stepped forward with a vicious smile. He's being too kind, Nyra. We should burn that barn with you and your freaks inside. Corvin moved to Nyra's side, still human, but power radiated from him like a storm front. She is not an Omega, Corvin said, his voice a low, dangerous counterpoint to Halleck's roar. And you are not her alpha. Halleck's eyes widened when he finally took in Corvin. The size, the scars, the dominance carved into every line of him. This wasn't a pack alpha. This was a true alpha. Then he saw Nyra, not the trembling, half-frozen girl he'd cast out. Her hair wild and clean, her posture unyielding, her eyes once a dull brown, now blazing silver. She radiated power, not fear. She looked magnificent. Nyra Halleck commanded desperation, leaking into his voice. Whatever this thing has done to you, come home. I withdraw your banishment. I will find a place for you. A place, Nyra's voice cut like ice. Where, Halleck? The kitchens. The mending shed, curled on the floor beneath your feet. You are mine, Halleck roared, control snapping. You are Stone River. I am nothing of yours, Nyra said. She lifted her hand. Where Corvin had grasped it, a faint swirling silver mark glowed across her palm, shaped like a crescent moon. Corvin raised his own hand. An identical mark burned on his skin. The matriarch has chosen her mate, Corvin stated. Not a boast, simply truth. Halleck stared at the mark, the mating mark, the one he should have had. The bond said to be given only by the goddess herself. Vexa saw it too. Liar, she shrieked, face twisting. You stole him from me, before anyone could react. Vexa shifted. With a vicious snarl she lunged, not at Corvin, at Nyra, a fatal mistake. Corvin moved, but Nyra was faster. The world didn't slow for her. She sped up. She didn't dodge. She didn't flinch. She caught Vexa's lunging wolf by the throat with one hand, bare feet unmoving in the snow. The impact sounded like a body slamming into stone. Vexa gurgled, paws clawing the air, choking. Nyra's arm didn't even tremble. She leaned forward, silver eyes burning straight into Vexa's panicked yellow ones. You took nothing from me, Nyra whispered. Then a burst of cold white energy, moonlight, turned into force, exploded from her palm. Not physical. Power. Vexa was hurled 20 feet back, crashing into a tree. She didn't rise. She shifted back into human form, unconscious and broken. The valley went silent. The 22 Stone River wolves stared, growls dying in their throats. Halleck looked from Vexa's limp form to the woman standing tall in the snow, her hand still glowing faintly. This is your last chance, Halleck, Nyra said, her voice ringing with matriarch authority. Take your warriors, go home, and never threaten my family again. Family, Halleck spat, pointing at the 10 men behind her. They are rogues, and you are one of them. I have 20 wolves. We will. He doesn't learn, Vale muttered, drawing a blade. No, Corvin said, placing a firm hand on Vale's shoulder, eyes never leaving Halleck. He doesn't. And he has threatened our queen. Corvin stepped forward, voice low and lethal. You brought 20 wolves. You should have brought 100. He turned to his brothers. Guard. Unchained. In one unified, bone-shaking instant, the 10 men shifted. But they didn't become wolves. They became more. Bones broke but continued growing. Fur exploded across swelling muscle. Fangs extended shorter than a wolf's, but thicker built for crushing bone. Their shoulders broadened bodies towering monstrous and ancient. They weren't wolves. They were dire wolves. 10 of them, massive primeval mythic guardians of the first packs unseen for a millennium, and each one stood a full third larger than Halleck's alpha form. The 22 Stone River warriors whimpered tails pinned tight, backing away in absolute submission. This was no battlefield. This was a massacre waiting to happen. Halleck, still in human skin, collapsed to his knees in the snow. His gaze swept over the 10 monstrous dire wolves behind Nyra, then to Vexa's broken body sprawled in the snow, then back to the glowing, terrifying, breathtaking woman he had thrown away. His pride shattered, his arrogance cracked to dust. What remained was the ice-cold realization of what he had done. He bowed his head, forehead pressed into the snow. Alpha Queen, he whispered, voice wrecked. Mercy. The valley fell under a suffocating hush, broken only by the frightened whines of Halleck's warriors and the ragged, panicked breathing of the Alpha kneeling before her. Nyra's eyes blazed silver, a cold flame burning deep inside her. The power that had surged through her power that had dismantled Vexa as if she were nothing, still thrummed in her blood. It was a potent, intoxicating song, one the darkness inside her urged her to obey. Finish him. End him. Claim everything, every moment of cold, every hunger pang, every whispered insult, every year of her life lived in fear. All of it begged to be avenged. Behind her, the 10 dire wolves waited, a living barricade of ancient fury and shadow. One word from her, just one, and Stone River would fall to its knees forever. Corvin's dire wolf, a massive black beast, took one slow, thunderous step forward. His growl rolled like a distant avalanche, watching her, testing her, waiting to see what kind of queen she truly was. Healer or destroyer. He broke you, her wolf whispered, but the voice was no longer furious. It was calm, ancient. They are all broken, and we are the healer of the broken. Vengeance is a stone. Justice is a seed. Choose. Nyra exhaled long and steady. The white hot rage in her eyes softened, not extinguished, but controlled, banked like embers, protected under careful watch. She stepped forward. Corvin's shadow moved with her. She stopped in front of the kneeling Alpha. Get up, Halleck. Her voice wasn't loud. It didn't need to be. It carried through the valley with the weight of a decree older than any pack. Halleck rose a fraction off his knees, no higher than a deep crouch, trembling violently, unable to meet her gaze. He'd seen everything, the dire wolves. Vexa's brutal defeat, the silver light of a matriarch burning in the woman he'd once called nothing. His entire understanding of power had been shattered in less than 5 minutes. You have a choice, Nyra said, projecting her voice to every warrior watching with terrified eyes. The old ways, the pride that fractures a pack. The cruelty masquerading as strength, the discarding of the weak so the strong feel superior. End tonight. She looked past him at the 20 wolves who had come to kill her. I am Nyra of the lunar matriarch line. This is my shadow guard, and this valley, every part of it, is my territory. Her words were a claim, and even the wind paused as if the goddess leaned in to listen. We are not here to rule you, she continued, turning back to Halleck. We are here to lead. She circled him slowly, the dire wolves fanning out behind her like a living tide of silver and shadow, herding the Stone River pack inward, forcing them to bow lower without a single word. Your actions, she said, stopping behind Halleck, so he had to twist painfully to keep her in sight, were not only cruel, they violated the Alpha's first law, protect the pack. You did not protect me. You used your strength to break the weakest. You banished a packmate to die for your pride. Halleck flinched as if struck. It was my thought, he began. You thought nothing. She snapped, her voice dipped in frost. You let your power blind you. You didn't care who it destroyed. She stepped around to face him again. By every right, I should strip you of your title, your pack, your life. Halleck's breath hitched. It is what you would do. The moment hung suspended, sharp and breathless. But Nyra continued, I will not begin my path by walking yours. I will not build my future on the rubble of your pride. She lifted her chin. You will remain Alpha of Stone River for now. Halleck looked up, disbelief widening his eyes. A seed of hope, a tremble of relief. Do not mistake this for forgiveness, Nyra said, her tone hardening like tempered steel. This is a leash. Nyra said, her voice a steady, razor-edged calm. Your Alpha title is now a duty, not a crown. You'll answer not to your own pride, but to the laws of true protection. Her silver eyes locked on Halleck. You answer to me now. You will protect your pack, all of your pack, from your fiercest warrior to the smallest pup. Halleck swallowed, shaking. Yes. Yes, Alpha Queen. But how? How do I atone? You'll start, Nyra said, lifting a hand toward the shattered barn behind her, by rebuilding what you helped destroy. You and your 20 warriors will raise this barn again, not as a ruin, but as a second great hall, a hall for allied packs. You'll use your own hands, and you will serve the first meal inside it. It was brilliant judgment, no execution, no humiliation. A lesson in humility. A punishment through responsibility. And her, Dren asked, hoarsely pointing to where Severin knelt beside Vexa's unconscious body. Nyra stared at the woman who had torn at her throat only minutes before. She will not be killed, Nyra said. She will not be left for dead. When she wakes, she is banished. She'll go to the human lands, no pack, no rank. If she doesn't value a pack, then she can learn to live without one. A shudder of relief swept through Stone River. Halleck, truly broken, bowed again until his forehead touched the snow. Alpha Queen, he whispered, voice thick with something raw and new. I accept. I will serve. I will atone. One by one, the 21 warriors shifted back into human form, kneeling in the snow, bowing not just to her strength, but to her mercy. From the back of the group, 2 figures stumbled forward, faces marked by desperate, painful hope. Derek and Lyra, Nyra's parents. They collapsed at her feet, clutching the edge of her cloak with shaking hands. Nyra, my daughter, Lyra sobbed, voice breaking apart. We saw, Goddess. We saw. Please, you must believe us. Believe what Nyra's voice turned to ice. The mercy she'd shown Halleck vanished instantly. This wasn't a pack matter. This was blood. You let them spit on me, starve me, shame me, throw me out to die in a blizzard. How is that protection, the prophecy? Derek choked. His face had gone pale. The old Alpha Garon. He was a tyrant when you were born. And you didn't cry, but your eyes glowed silver. Nyra froze. We knew, Derek whispered. We knew who you were. We heard the whispers. The matriarch will be born. We knew Garon would see you as a threat. He would have killed you. Lyra wept. A stillborn pup. lost in the night. So we sought out the hedge witch. Derek continued, each word ripping at him. Ismera. She bound your wolf. She built the cage around your power. She said it would hide you, make you small, make you harmless, keep you alive. We thought a living weak daughter was better than a dead powerful one, Lyra said, clutching Nyra's cloak tighter. We chose to keep you alive. Nyra stared down at them, these two people who had shaped the misery of her entire life. Not from hatred, from fear. You didn't protect me, Nyra said, voice trembling with 2 decades of buried rage. You clipped my claws. You stole my voice. You silenced my wolf. You turned me into prey and left me to survive a pack full of predators. You didn't save my life. Her voice broke, then hardened again. You stole it. She jerked her cloak free from their grip. Her parents recoiled as if she'd struck them, but then the matriarch inside her, the healer, rose again. Nyra looked at them. Truly looked. 2 broken, terrified people who had made the worst choice, and had been trapped by that choice ever since. The damage you caused is a mountain, Nyra said quietly. I can't cross it. Not today. Maybe not ever. We will do anything, Derek whispered. Then start with the truth, Nyra said. You'll stand before the entire pack and confess everything you just told me. You'll tell them what you did, what Garen was, and you'll dig up every secret that has poisoned this pack for a generation. Atonement is a long road, Nyra said, her voice steady as steel. Yours begins now. Go. Derek and Lyra staggered to their feet, their faces twisted with shame and an aching, desperate relief. For the first time in their lives, they had been truly seen, and they had been spared. They bowed and retreated into the crowd, joining the kneeling Stone River wolves. Nyra turned toward the valley, her gaze sweeping over what used to be her pack, and now bowed as her subjects. The night is over, she called. Her voice carried like a winter wind, soft, cold, undeniable. A new dawn is coming. Go home. Rest. Heal. But know this? Corvin shifted back into his human form beside her, snow steaming off his shoulders. He lifted his eyes to the sky. The blood moon is coming, he said, his voice resonant with the weight of prophecy. When the veil thins and old evils claw their way into the world again. Nyra nodded, accepting it with a calm that surprised even her. We'll be ready, she declared. Go. The Stone River pack rose not as a defeated army but a humbled people. Halleck, with one last look that bordered on reverence, led them back into the forest. Her parents followed, heads down, carrying the weight of 20 years of secrets on their backs. Silence settled, true silence. Not fear, not tension, just peace. Nyra exhaled, and suddenly her knees felt weak. The 10 men her guard were still there, still watching her with a quiet, unshakable pride. Before she could speak, Corvin moved. He crossed the distance in 3 strides, his black hair wild, his scarred eye blazing. He didn't bow. He didn't speak. He simply pulled her into his arms and crushed her against his chest. His entire body trembled, not with fear, but with the release of a lifetime of holding himself together. You're real, he murmured against her neck, his voice breaking. We found you. Nyra melted into him, her fingers curling into the fabric at his back. She didn't feel cold. She didn't feel alone. For the first time in her life, she felt home. Corvin pulled back just enough to frame her face in his hands. Alpha Queen, he said with a roguish grin, finally letting himself smile. Look at you. Shut up, she muttered, but her lips curved into a real smile, soft and warm and almost unfamiliar. You knew this would happen. I knew you would happen, he corrected, reverence softening every feature. His thumb brushed over the silver crescent on her palm. His own mark pulsed in answer. The healer of the broken. Nyra's gaze drifted past him to the 9 other faces that were now her world. Vial already sharpening a blade. ashore studying the barn like he was planning its reconstruction in his head. Severin quietly checking his medical gear. Kieran and Roald arguing about how to build a fire. Solak stretching his shoulders, still buzzing with leftover adrenaline. Heron standing like a stone sentinel watching the tree line. They weren't waiting for commands. They were simply existing as her family. Vale, she called, her voice ringing with new authority. Take first watch. Yes, my queen. Solak ashore. Scout the perimeter. I want to know this valley like the back of my hand by sunrise. They straightened immediately, grinning like they'd been waiting their entire lives to hear her voice like that. Yes, my queen, ashore said with an exaggerated bow. Vale shoved him aside. Move. Nyra stepped toward the beaten-down barn and dragged her palm across its splintered wood. We stay here, she said. This is home. This is where we begin. Corvin caught her hand, their fingers lacing together as naturally as breathing. And what a beginning it is, he murmured. They walked into the barn not as fugitives, seeking shelter, but as leaders, claiming their stronghold. The barn where an Omega had once curled up to die was now the birthplace of a queen. The nest of 10 wolves had been the cradle of something far greater, a legacy, a prophecy, a revolution. And Nyra was only getting started. She hadn't been saved by fate. She hadn't been chosen by accident. She had been forged in cold, forged in rejection, forged into the queen she was always meant to be. But this was not the end. Halleck still held his title. The blood moon crept closer, and darkness ancient and hungry was stirring. What waited for Nyra and her 10 dire wolf guardians? If you want the next chapter, the rise of the lunar matriarch, tell me in the comments. Your support shapes these stories. Hit like. Share this with someone who needs a fierce heroine. Subscribe and ring that bell. You do not want to miss the storm that's coming.